Hi, I'm Greta Oliver. Welcome to the Educate You podcast, your roadmap to learning tips, techniques, and strategies to enable your student to successfully navigate the road to and through higher education. Today's guest on the Trends in Higher Education Educate You podcast is Matt Collier. Matt Collier is an educator, business owner, and supporter of people. He has been in education for 22 years. He's a 22-year vet, I want to say, of education, being a teacher. He spent many years educating the youth of North Carolina, has recently ventured into teaching in South Carolina. His background includes being an English teacher as well as a teacher of leadership skills, creative writing, and journalism. He has also coached boys basketball, men's and women's soccer, and been a student council advisor. Now, based on his expertise and his longevity in the field of education, he's going to be speaking with us today about how to help students who are college-bound develop academic credentials that will set them apart from their peers. This is especially useful as some of the admissions decisions and the way that admissions process has been set in stone for a number of years. Now these are changing. There are new trends in higher education regarding admissions. So we want to hear everything, every single thing that Matt Collier has to say. Please join me in welcoming Matt Collier to Educate You.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Oliver.
Thank you so much. I just want to preface this with the other podcast I had, like a season or a series, and we were talking about the College Roadmap, my book. And so now we're kind of transitioning out of that. We're going to come to an end with those podcasts, probably at the end of September. And then we're going to begin just talking about discussions in higher ed, trends in higher ed. And you are one of the first to be recorded for this particular season, I should say, season 2, series 2.
All right.
Trends in higher education. And so I'm really interested in the fact that, you've been working with students for a number of years, and you have seen students as a high school teacher, you've seen students as they are working toward, graduation, going away to college, and you kind of have your finger on the pulse of what's going on there, even though some of that is kind of, probably different within the last 3 years or so. Maybe you've noticed some differences in students, what they're doing and how they're preparing and how they're feeling emotionally about all of this. But I know for a fact that there are many admissions trends that are coming down the pike. They're not, any kind of way worldwide, nationwide, or anything like that, but they are having different ways of, or thinking of different ways to admit students rather than going through the traditional admissions process that we're so used to.
Right.
And then also with the test optional coming into play, and some students are not opting in to take tests. They want to go to universities where they don't have to take tests. So all that to say that they need to have a better way, or at least a plan in their mind to set themselves apart, because how else are they going to be judged? How is their package, if you will, going to be explored or viewed, against their peers? And so that's where we're trying to go today. And so I guess what I would ask you is, what have you noticed maybe in the way students are acting about their college search, if anything, and what kind of specific things can you tell students today that they can do to prepare themselves better academically and to be able to set themselves apart from their peers when it's so many people competing for less spots?
So I think, like you touched on, there's a lot of competition for those spots. So how do you, separate yourself, from what you look like on paper to, how you interact with people and those activities. So I kind of touched on a few things that my points would be, being involved in clubs and extracurricular activities And what I mean by that is not just being in clubs. You know, a lot of times students will come to me and ask, you know, hey, Mr. Collier, would you write me a letter of recommendation? And I say, absolutely. Few and far between. I'm like, you don't want me writing one, but the ones that I say yes. Give me a little rap sheet about you. You know, what's your resume look like? What are some things that you've done? And they're like, well, I either get, well, I haven't done much, or, I'm in student council. I'm like, okay, well, what did you do while you were in student council? They said, well, I was in student council. Well, okay, do you just show up for a job and that's it? Or what do you do in that job that makes that job excel?
Right.
So the clubs and the extracurricular activities, being involved, not just, again, being in those. And where I've seen some people go the extreme and get in too many clubs and activities and not producing, just, again, being a warm body within that organization or that activity, just to say, I want to pat my stats and I was involved in this and this and this. Because I feel, if I'm going to hire for your job, and if you think about college admissions in some ways, because you're a reflection of them, that institution. So what is it that you're going to do to make me, this institution look better? So, because you're a reflection of them, and you speak poorly of them if you don't succeed. So when you're in there, what are you going to do? I've had some kids that are so devoted to just one club, and that's great, but that whole jack of all trades, master of none is still better than the master of one. That old adage there, not to sound too cliche, but it does say something to have a little bit of experience in other areas. So high school, I feel like, is a great place to get your feet wet in different things and find stuff. And you may find that, oh, wow, I had a love for this that I didn't know about, or, a skill, or, a high skill set for something that I didn't think about it because I thought it was just one thing. So the clubs, the extracurricular activities, the elective courses, again, kind of being vulnerable and branching out. Don't just pick the things that you think, oh, well, I want a career path in that, or that's just, as I said, I teach journalism or leadership skills. With journalism, they think, oh, it's just writing. Well, communications has obviously expanded even just in the last few years, as we've seen a need for more online type of mediums. So I show them photography, videography, the podcasts, the vodcasts, like we're doing here. And they think, oh, well, they find a skill set. And I've had students that said they wanted to get out that first day and they stuck with it. And one is now, he just graduated through Wingate University with they have a ESPN3 works with their students to train them. And he graduates with over 100 directions for ESPN. How many people can say they can do that? He can get a job anywhere in communications, and he didn't know he necessarily wanted to do that to begin with. So being vulnerable was another point there, being vulnerable to some of those elective courses that you wouldn't normally think that you'd want to get involved. Try art, try these clubs, ROTC, and you might find that they even have a pathway to get scholarships and other avenues that might lead you into some career path, that you might want to be in. And then being involved in your community, whether that's in a church. Some people say they haven't had a job and, an after school job, but then I find out they're babysitting. Well, that's a career, that's a skill that not everybody can do. And it shows that that's a kind of a managerial thing. How do you do, why do they choose you? That's a big responsibility to babysit. I have 2 children myself. I'm pretty thorough in who we choose to be our babysitters. So that makes a big deal. So again, branching out and showing those responsibilities, being involved. If you're involved in a church group or, in some other institution, if it's what are the Rotary clubs and different things like that. And we have branches here in Monroe where they're like a student student board of like student council here, but in the city that takes all of the county's students, high school students, and gets them involved. So again, they can go into a political area or something like that. So to me, I think when you show it on paper, you made great grades, and that's not a deterrent by any means to say that you don't need good academic skills, but to show that you're well-rounded, because more and more jobs don't want just one person to do that one job. Why can I pay 5 people to do different things? Why I can pay one person to do that job? And that's what's made it more cutthroat out there, where you're in more competitive when you get into these job areas, because hey, I can pay one person that has Adobe skills, that has, I talked about that with your husband in his class, the Adobe skill set, the writing skill set, all these photography, and I can pay one person for that. So
right. That sounds good. I love that. And the actual being involved, I think that's the key to all of this. Being involved in your school, getting your academic credentials, your grades, number one, grades, looking good as best as you can. Also, not just being involved in clubs, but actually doing the work of the clubs, or doing the work of the volunteering, or doing the work in the community, being able to articulate exactly what you did and how that affected someone or a group of people. And I think that will go a long way actually in setting students apart, because we have to remember, even if we're talking about the traditional admissions process, when you turn your information in or submit your application, you want your application and what you've done to actually tell a story that they can visualize, rather than being just words on paper. So being an active participant in your life, I guess I want to say, just in general, would certainly do well, be well, or do well. I don't know what word I'm trying to use right now, but that would help a student to be able to be seen actually. And someone who's reading their application to be able to pull out their activities, exactly what they did, how they contributed. And so that's really key. And I think that even goes beyond applications or admissions processes. My words are crazy today, but it goes beyond that, because even once a student graduates from college, what can you say you actually did beyond the grade point average that you came out with? What did you do? How did you contribute? How was that place left better than when you got there?
That's a great way to put it. Yep. And I think being vulnerable in that sense too, to show growth. I've been through a lot of teacher evaluation processes, and they don't want you to necessarily say, I'm the best of the best, I've done everything great. They want to see that you've shown growth, because otherwise, why are you going to that institute? If you know everything already, why are you seeking us out? So to show that vulnerability and say, you know what, I don't know anything, but I'm willing to learn more, or hey, I tried it this way and it didn't work, so I learned. I've had students that run for student council and don't get that position, and a lot of them will just, well, that's it, I'm out. And then, but the few, and again, this is what separates them from others, the few that say, well, I didn't win the race, to be student council president, but I'm going to still be a member, and I'm going to run the pep rallies. I'm going to run the penny wars to get, the what do they call them? Why can't I think of it? Fundraising, things like that to get those things. And those kids stand out. Those are the ones I'm like, I write a glowing letter. Did they have? Do I write them? They were student council? No, they lost the race, but they still continue to take that and grow. And I think that stands out. So don't be discouraged, even if you aren't at the top. I was not, I learned a lot more so being a teacher than I did a student about being a student.
I think we all did. When we look back on,
I can go back now, students,
right? You're right, absolutely. And so I love that too. So we're trying to get the person to put themselves in a position to be somebody that the college wants,
Right.
chooses, and would choose based on the information that they send in. And so if we go back to like direct admissions, what have you even thought about that? Or, that phenomenon where they're just fill in a profile or fill in just like something like a common application, and then certain universities around the country are just looking at that profile and deciding based on that profile, and maybe a principal or someone saying this person,
Getting that
you
backing,
should
yeah.
look at this person, and then they automatically get admitted. So have you heard anything about that?
That's
happening?
somewhat new. I am
Mhm.
hearing it, and I think about it in the same way, as an educator, as a coach,
Mhm.
even, I hear, oh, well, they were the star of their, U14 team and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And they come, and so they don't need to try out. They just need to be on your team, your
Right.
soccer team. And I'm like, well, how's that, one, fair to everybody that just tried out? But two,
Mhm.
you know, what about them? I need to see that. To me, I think that's going to set up some, again, if I was an institution, or even as a business owner, do I want to hire somebody that I don't know what they've produced and just based
Mhm.
off of, on paper? I think there's a lot to be said about soft
Mhm.
skills and how
Mhm.
you work with people. I use myself as an example. I was not a very top student even in college, and I went to school with lots of people who were making all A's and did everything right on paper to be a teacher. And they got out there and did their student teaching. And when they finished, they're like, nope, I'm not
No
doing it.
way.
Can't do it. They couldn't
Mhm.
hack it. And, that again, that's not to, it's got to be a balance. I've
Right.
grown up always
Right.
knowing about a balance. You can't have over one thing. Over, street smarts will get you so far, but you have to have certain things. So
Mhm.
to see institutions just going, I think they're gonna. It could work.
Mhm.
I think it's going to Vegas. It's a gamble, but I think it
Mhm.
could
Mhm.
pay out. If they have a good track record,
Right.
then yes. But
Right.
um, somebody like me, I wouldn't have benefited from that. I didn't have a good necessarily. I mean, I
Mhm.
made grades. I was a
Right.
B student, but I didn't have the clubs, the activities. I played sports, and that was it.
Mhm.
So I had an after school job, and so that I think that showing that involvement is going to work better in going to an institution, because I would think about what would I want if I was a business owner. Put your switch, do a role play.
Mhm.
Would you want to just hire somebody or allow somebody in your institution based off of just what there are on paper,
Right.
or
Right.
and
Or
again,
on the say so of someone else
yeah,
who
on the say
says,
so of somebody else,
basically, this is a great candidate and you should just admit them. But I think, I know it's being done on some different college campuses. Most of them are kind of small and have, right now, they have like people that are applying like from high schools where they're small,
right.
and the principals literally know these students. And
Hmm.
so maybe that's a good way to kind of start, rather
Yeah,
than just casting a wide net and just starting to do this, because at least you have a better idea of what kind of student you're dealing with based on that person say so and the reputation of the school
right.
district. So
Yeah, that and again, I think it's case by case.
absolutely.
If somebody has that reputation, because I mean, I wouldn't be where I was without standing on the shoulders of others. So
Absolutely.
having that help and the faith from others to,
Mhm.
hey, you can do this, and I'm going to back you and help you get a job.
Right.
That's what happened after I left school to get a teaching job. Somebody vouched
Mhm.
for me because they knew what I was doing, and so I think that's not to be totally excluded, but I think you got to be more selective in when you do that.
Okay. Let me throw another question in there, just
Okay.
talking about the pandemic and everything that happened to kind of shut the world down. Um, Knowing what you know now about how we fared through the pandemic and what schools are going through right now, would your answers be different as to how students should prepare?
No, I don't think so. I think we were pre-pandemic. I think we were as a society, as a country, kind of pushing towards more virtual schooling anyway. And watching my own children and having to teach all virtual
Mm-hmm.
and seeing one, how my own kids and then my own students not do well from it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think in fact, this in some ways helped us to see that there is something to be said about in-person education
Okay.
and instruction. Now, I think again, there can be a balance of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it has to entirely be that way. I think we can lean more towards a flipped classroom. And this is probably another topic for another podcast,
Right.
but
Right.
you need to have that. Again, I go back to that balance of in-person and technology is here to stay. I'm not denying that. And I think that it can be beneficial. In fact, with the vodcast, this allows everybody to be, I'm in Monroe, you're in, Chapel Hill. So like, this allows us to be able to do that. So technology has definitely helped us, but to change my answers, I don't think so. I think this only shows the more need for those soft skills.
Right.
Nobody, it's easy to sit behind a keyboard and say what you want, but to look somebody in the eyes, I noticed a big decline in students making eye contact.
Right.
And, with return to classroom, I do a lot of in-person presentations again, because I want them you need to have some form of talking in front of people.
Right.
And making eye contact. Now it's not the basis of everything, but you need to have that.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Just checking.
I may have trailed off there. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So when should all of this start? When should students begin trying to position themselves? Like what grade, what age, and what should they do in that process?
Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with that, but just my experiencing students, because I mainly taught, I'm certified 9 through 12, but I mainly taught 11th and 12th graders. Now, you kind of start back down, and so I'm back teaching freshmen, and I'm noticing there's a maturity difference.
Yes.
Everything's new. You see them looking around. Wow, this is crazy. So, and most traditional high schools are 9 to 12. I know some go 10 to 12. So depending, I think that framework isn't bad if you were to start. I think ninth grade year is an exploratory year.
Okay.
I know for me, it was a culture shock. I went from I was at a big high school and getting lost, locked in lockers, things like that. So, and I didn't do well academically. It wasn't until 10th grade year that I figured it out. So I think there's some little bit of leniency, a little leeway to say, okay, here's your introductory. Yes, you still want to make good grades, but I think where they should start to count maybe 10th grade.
Okay.
I don't have any like research to back that or anything like that. That's just more based off of experience and maturity.
That's fine.
With seeing students, some of these they're still kids. I mean, they're
right. Absolutely, they definitely are.
Yeah.
And from my background, I actually taught mostly 11th and 12th graders, mostly 12th graders. I had a few ninth grade students in like general business class, in the general type classes that I taught. But I would agree there is a big shift in, their maturity level, even them knowing themselves. A lot of times they really don't know anything about really anything. And so, as soon as I would say, just from my opinion, as soon as they kind of figure out like what they're interested in,
right,
and if they could have maybe some of their clubs, organizations, volunteer work, all of that kind of focused on something or tied in some way toward their interests, that might help them to be more successful because it's something they're interested in.
Right.
And so, grades and all that, you get the good grades in the classes that you're interested in. And so you have to push through about the classes that you really aren't interested in.
Yeah.
But, the other stuff is just something that comes naturally. And so I think as soon as they can realize what they're interested in, that's a good time. And probably after the 9th grade, which is definitely a transition year.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any other tips that you can provide to help students manage all of this successfully, or how should they go
So,
about that?
so again, I go back to that keyword I've said is the balance. So I've
Mm-hmm.
seen students that go so, they had that, whether the pressures are at home or just even themselves, because sometimes students I've seen become their own worst enemy because I've got to do this to get into this college. They've been made to
Right,
believe this. They
right,
have to
right.
be so involved, just in the opposite way. So having a balance, being able to, we've seen, a huge increase in mental health awareness. And there's
Mm-hmm.
a reason for that.
Oh, yeah.
I've experienced it myself with a lot of things that I've been through. So taking that time and saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yes, I'm going to be involved in these things, but not being aware to not overdo it,
Mm-hmm.
just to pat those stats. Find
Absolutely.
those few areas, and then put your love and your devotion into those areas, while also taking time and taking care of yourself, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that, again, no business, no institution is going to want somebody that is so, because you're going to reach a breaking point at some point.
Right,
And
right.
then not only for yourself, but that the institution or the
Mm-hmm.
business that hires you eventually, because I mean that's the long-term goal. We're getting the knowledge and the experience on how the training, how to do a specific skill set for a
Mm-hmm.
job. And if I can't produce in that job, then what happens? So
Right.
definitely being aware of mental health, taking that time,
Mm-hmm.
balancing out those activities,
Mm-hmm.
doing things that you do enjoy.
Right.
Um, that you can turn those things into it. Photography for me was
Mm-hmm.
uh, a hobby, and now it's turned into a full-time second job, which
Right.
is, I'm not
Right.
complaining. It's great if
Mm-hmm.
I had to find a new hobby. So now I'm fishing, and that's my mental health. That's
Okay.
my
Right.
where I go and fish, and it's something I used
Mm-hmm.
to do as a kid, and I'm like, yep, I'm gonna get back into that.
Cool. Okay, so we're talking about mental health. So important. It
Hmm.
is vitally important right now, as well as physical health.
Yes. Oh
Making
yeah.
sure that they're taking care of themselves physically, doing the things that they need to do to be healthy, and not engaging in things that are not healthy. And so
Absolutely.
that's a big key too. And so I think thinking about mental health and physical health, mental health above really all else, because if you are not mentally healthy and not in the right place
Hmm.
in your mind, the body is definitely not going to follow,
Right.
and everything falls apart at that point. And so
Yeah.
that's definitely something that we want to continue to talk about and be aware of
Yeah. And don't be
for
afraid to
all of
talk
our
about
students,
it.
regardless of what level they're on.
Right.
Okay. So thank you so much. You've been so
Yeah.
helpful,
I
so
hope so.
helpful. I just believe that, the key things from this conversation was that students need to be active participants in their lives.
Number one. Yeah.
This college going process, or even thinking about applications and making application to a certain university and all this other stuff, it's going to happen regardless of whether it's direct or whether it's the traditional way. But in order to have things that make your credentials pop
Hmm.
and can separate you, you need to be actively doing the things that you are doing, spending your time wisely in your volunteering, your community outreach, your jobs, whatever you're doing. Make sure you are doing something that is moving you forward, not just a job for money, or not just being in a club just to be a seat warmer,
Right.
but actually taking those roles on that will help build you up, build up your skill set, which is what we're talking about
Hmm.
anyway. Even at the end of college, you need to have some skills that you can say, this is what I can bring to your company. This is what I can do for your
Yeah.
organization based on this, and this that I've done in the
I
past.
tell my students, think of it, high school and all your education, like a toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And the classes and the courses you take are the different tools. And you need to go build a house. Can you
Right.
build a house with just a wrench, just a hammer? No,
Absolutely
you
not.
need all those tools. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you fill up your toolbox to say, I'm the right man for the job,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
person, sorry, to do
Mm-hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
and complete the task.
Right. That's excellent. And on that note, we can conclude our podcast. Thank you so much for coming. I love that toolkit analogy. I'm probably going to steal it. I just let you know.
Hey, beg, borrow, and steal.
I try to give credit though. I'll give you credit,
That's
but that's wonderful. And it makes perfect sense. So thank you for your input, your information, and for your commitment to students.
Thank you for having me. This has been great. Like I said, big honor.
Thank you for joining us today on Educate You. If you wish, you can send me your questions or comments about the college going process or the podcast contents by sending an email to Dr. Greta at gretaoliverconsulting.com. Also, beginning each week after the podcast airs, check for a companion blog on my website's blog page at gretaoliverconsulting.com. My book, College Roadmap, Essential Tips for First-Time College Students and Their Families, is available for sale on Amazon.com. Join us next week for another tip or strategy to make the road to higher education easier for your student.